Hello and welcome to Electric Sheep, episode 15. My name's Carl Sykes, and with me this week are Paul Andrews.
Hello.
And our special guest this week is Stephen Biggs, who is the project tutor for the Engineering Work-Based Learning Programme in Energy Management. So, welcome, Steve.
Thank you very much.
We'll be talking to Steve a little bit later on, but what we're going to start off with, as per usual, is our kind of brief round robin. And I say brief this week because there's only myself and Paul in the studio. But our brief round robin of what we've been up to this week, whether it's something we've been practicing with or something we've read online that piques our interest. So, Paul, if I start with you first of all, what do you want to talk about this week?
The death of Google Reader. I was very sad about this. For those of you who,
indeed.
we record these shows a couple of weeks in advance before they go out. But say this week, Google announced that it was going to be shuttering the doors on Google Reader, which is its long-time RSS feed syndication tool. For those of you who don't know what Google Reader is, it basically allowed you, rather than going off and running around and looking at several different news websites to get updates about various things you might be interested in, it allowed you essentially to connect a series of pipes from all of these different websites into one page, which was the Google Reader page. So you could then go to this one place and read all of the news stories from all of these different sites that interested you.
Right.
So in terms of kind of a productivity and a workflow, it's used by a lot of people whose job it is to kind of create information. So a lot of kind of journalists would use it. A lot of researchers would use it.
Yeah.
I use it extensively we mentioned it before, I run my own website, and Google Reader is the primary kind of mechanism by which I get all of these updates for free tools and software because I don't have time to run off to 20, 30 different websites. So, they're closing it down essentially because it's not making them any money, and they're trying to promote people sharing content on Google+.
Right. Which, of course, is their sort of baby, isn't it?
It is their baby.
They're pushing really hard, and we've talked about Google+, and it has its great points. We've talked about Google Hangouts previously and things like that. Great ways to use Google+. But so obviously they're trying to move everybody across.
That's right.
And how does Google+ do what Google Reader used to do? So their reasoning for moving people across is simply just because they want to get people on Google+.
Google themselves they're undergoing a bit of a restructure at the moment. They're trying to slim down their portfolio of products because every product and service they run obviously costs them money in terms of people developing it and servers it's got to sit on and so on. The bottom line is money, and the main reason seems to be that only a very small percentage of people use Google Reader. But as a couple of news articles have pointed out in the last kind of 24, 48 hours, the small minority of people that use Google Reader are the ones that then publish the content out for other people to look at. So essentially
they're taking away the kind of middleman who condenses all of that information into something easily manageable and readable for the next stage to actually be able to absorb what information is there.
And certainly at the University of Wales Newport, we've been championing the use of Google Reader for about 4 or 5 years now for students to say, well, look, if you need to do some research, if you want to stay on top of the latest developments, particularly with people like our counselling department, we would say, well, there are websites, and our psychology department, there are websites that will publish news stories relating to counselling and psychology and things like that. But rather than the student having to keep going to that website to check all the time, we say to them, we'll accept Google Reader up, and the information will be delivered to you, either on your computer or on your tablet, on your smartphone, or whatever it is. So my task has been essentially to sit down and figure out what the alternatives are going to be.
Right, okay.
Now, Google isn't shutting the door on Reader until the 1st of July, so we've got a little bit of time to get this sorted. But at the moment, the one kind of service that's stood out to me is one called Feedly. The website is feedly.com, and we'll put a link to it underneath this podcast. And the nice thing about Feedly is they've just announced that they foresaw Google shutting Google Reader down. And they've released this thing called Project Normandy.
Okay.
The name of which might appeal to you.
Indeed.
And it's been chosen for that particular reason. The idea is they're doing this to rescue all those stranded Google Reader users. So you can go to feedly.com and you can actually click on one button to transfer your Google Reader account and all of its settings straight over to Feedly. And you can then change the way it looks. So it looks exactly the same as Google Reader. It's actually a bit swisher, to be honest. It looks a bit nicer. Okay. And there's a free Android app, and there's a free kind of browser extension. There's a free iPhone app as well. So It's early days yet,
Yeah.
but Feedy.com seems to be one of the possible solutions out there, and it's literally it's 2 clicks. It's pain-free for people who want to kind of continue using that kind of service, but aren't going to be able to use Google Reader in the future. So, Carl, what have you been up to this week?
Well, this week I actually wanted to talk about not something, a particular sort of product that I've been using, but about an article I read online that just really piqued my interest. So I thought I'd just mention it and we can have a little chat about it. Essentially, the article was called "What It's Like to Get Online After 25 Years in Prison." Okay.
Wow.
It was by a guy called Michael Santos, who, and I'll give a little bit of background behind him. Michael was convicted of cocaine trafficking back in 1987. He's a 23-year-old man, convicted of cocaine trafficking, sent to prison for 45 years. He was sentenced to 45 years. He spent 25 years of those of his time in prison and was released in 2012. So when he was released, he had no idea. He was never allowed to use a computer whilst he was in prison. So he had no idea about emails, no idea about the World Wide Web, no idea about any of this technology that happened in those 25-year span. And essentially what he had done whilst he was in prison, although he hadn't actually physically been able to use any of these products, he was allowed books and kind of read vaguely around the subject, and it really piqued his interest. He knew there was this thing called email, but he didn't really know how it worked. He knew there was this thing called the World Wide Web, but he didn't know how it worked. So what he started doing is reading up on the information that was available whilst he was in prison, and on a daily or probably most likely a weekly basis, he was writing about his experiences of what he thought the internet would be like based upon just what he was reading. And he started sending out written posts to his friends and families who would then blog for him online. So essentially, he was kind of providing the information to a middleman who would blog about his experiences of trying to understand the internet and emails, but not actually being able to use them over the course of this 25-year span.
Wow.
So when he was finally released from prison, essentially he had thousands upon thousands upon thousands of blog posts already available online, all credited to him for being written, although he'd never actually seen the internet before. And he now basically writes a number of books about internet use. He's become quite a experienced user of kind of various elements of the World Wide Web, and essentially has written some books, articles. He does public speaking, guest speaks, talks, etc. On this subject here, and it was a really, really interesting article. And the reason, it's kind of a slightly sort of tentative link, but the reason I found this article so interesting was, we kind of think as people who work at a higher education institute that all the students we'll deal with on a daily basis have got knowledge of computers and technology and internet and whatever else. But actually, what we're finding more and more is we're meeting people who have next to no knowledge of computer use whatsoever. And a lot of people find it amazing that there are people out there who've never used a computer before in this day and age. But there are, and we deal with people on a daily basis who literally have to sit with us and be shown how to switch a computer on, let alone how to send an email or how to access the internet. So I was quite interested to just kind of liken this chap's experiences and actually get a full written detailed account of how he coped with knowing this was out there, but not actually being able to access and make use of it, and trying in some way to match that against the people that we deal with and how they know there's this thing called the internet. They know that there are computers out there. They know that their nephews and grandsons and nieces and whoever else have got them, but they don't know what to do with them. And it was just a really interesting article, and I just kind of wondered, I know you've had experience of people like that as well, who obviously not in that exact, it's a very extreme example, but you know that you have had dealings with people who literally, we're starting from the very basics of plug a computer in, press the button on the front to switch it on, or the back if it's a Mac. And I just wondered, kind of, in your experience, is this something you think that's still quite relevant, or is this kind of, are we moving away from that now and we're finding less and less of those examples?
No, I think it is still relevant. People will either gravitate towards a particular technology or a solution, or they won't. And what we tend to find is that, and this is, I mean, we've mentioned this in a couple of podcasts as well, about the problem with the education system in relation to kind of information technology and ICT, is that people will talk about this thing called ICT and they use it as a catch-all. So what we'll find that people will come to us, students will come to us, all ages, sexes, whatever, and they will be very comfortable and familiar with doing a certain task, because the internet and the computer is just a tool. So they might be say that they're very comfortable with word processing and using spreadsheets, no problem there. But what they won't have ever done would be ever maybe get involved with video editing or sound recording. So I think it's actually very rare for us to find someone who's like a Renaissance man or a Renaissance woman who can do all of these things.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think it's still relevant. Obviously, the example is a very extreme example because that individual hadn't done anything.
Yeah.
But I think actually a lot of people think the internet is Facebook.
Yeah.
A lot of people think so. It's. I think with what we experience is people have a preconceived notion of what their limits are, and the joy I take in my job is actually saying to people, I'm going to expand your horizons, but also not only that, I'm going to show you how you can do it. So it's not this mystical, magical thing that some Bill Gates wannabe can do. It's something that everyone can do.
Absolutely.
Be it the 83-year-old who wants to edit the photographs from a holiday, or the 45-year-old who shot a video on his phone, but he doesn't know how to get the video off his phone. And then we say, well, look, you can put that onto YouTube, and then you can send it to your friends. And it's all about giving people that kind of confidence and competence.
Absolutely.
But I'd be willing to bet money that the individual you're talking about already had, because he had the confidence to do something. He didn't know what it was, but he thought, well, I'm going to have a go, and it's all about confidence, really. About saying
absolutely. This chap, I should say that he was obviously a very confident chap, because despite the fact he was only 23, he was actually the kingpin of this cocaine smuggling racket. So he was a fairly confident chap. There's no worries about. But actually, going back to what you were saying, we've had this conversation before in a previous podcast about the fact that you talk to students and say, "What's your technological background?" And they say, "Oh, I did ICT at school." Well, what did you do? I used Microsoft Word and Excel.
Absolutely.
And we were talking about how really there's a need to start bringing elements of ICT as we know it back into the school systems, things like basic coding and whatever else it might be, and not sort of making students believe that just being able to use Microsoft Office package is all you need for an ICT skill. And I think there is a need for that to be kind of brought back into the education system.
There's an element of autonomy now, though, isn't it? I know that you and I, Carl, have discussed many tools.
Yes.
But because of time constraints
Absolutely.
and the use of YouTube, as you've said, you can teach yourself pretty much anything if you've got the inclination, the confidence,
Absolutely,
and the time to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, YouTube is a wonderful tool. You can watch a 10-minute. I think he must have been about 12 on one particular tool that I was looking at. A 12-year-old kid taught me. I think it was some of the Mac tools that I wasn't used to. I was a Windows user for a long time. I think now I can safely say I'm a convert.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've got to say on Steve's behalf here as well that I regularly get emails from Steve saying, I found this bit of software, can you give me a training session on it? And by the time we actually get to meet up, which may only be a matter of a day or two, Steve's already comes to me and says, well, I've spent a bit of time on this, I've watched a couple of videos, I've had a play with it, so really all I need to do now is just ask you a few questions to kind of tailor what I'm doing. So yeah, absolutely, you're clearly of that inclination that you don't want to just sit back and wait for someone to teach you something. You actually want to get hands-on and have a go at using it. Okay, so now we're going to have a little chat with Steve, who I've mentioned before works on our engineering work-based learning program. So Steve, if I can start off by kind of asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, and a bit more information about the program that you work on, and kind of what the purpose of this program is.
Well, I started on the program back in September last year. It was a fresh program that we'd sort of not inherited, but the big brother is Glamorgan University with the European Social Fund, who then had Swansea University as a partner, and then we partnered up with Swansea. So we're looking at levels 4 and 5 modules. We've got 4 modules currently, and at the moment, the first module went live about 2 to 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
We're looking at developing the content. I'm always, like you guys, looking at what's available for online learning. Sometimes it can be monotonous, but unfortunately, when you've got to deliver content, that's the nature of the beast, unfortunately. But I know that Carl and I, we've discussed over many months recently ways of utilizing technologies, ways of introducing new things to people, and basically getting that content out there in a way that is useful and makes people want to come back.
Absolutely. I mean, the great thing about this course, and I don't think we have anything similar to it, maybe one or two courses, but the thing that really makes this course stand out is almost all, if not all, and I'm sure Steve will be able to correct me on that in a second, of this course is taught as an online delivery. So you don't actually, as far as I'm aware, kind of sit down in front of a class at any point. No. Everything is delivered online. Now, I know lots of other universities do that, but that's quite new for us. It's a territory that we're kind of fairly tentatively getting into as an institution. And I just wondered if you could talk kind of about your experiences so far. And I know you're quite early on in the course, but your experiences in terms of how you had to create the course in the first instance compared to how you'd normally create a course when you were sat in front of a class, and then just kind of how it's worked so far over the first few weeks.
Well, the first couple of months was very intense because we started with a blank sheet of paper. We have got in the university energy management certificate and diploma that currently runs, but that is it's a distance learning course, but we wanted to be more up to date with it, I guess. That's delivered in a more traditional way, albeit not face to face, but where notes are just posted up.
Right.
People sort of summarize the notes and then assessments are made. There are assessments in a similar way that we utilize in a face-to-face environment. Submission is all online, but we're utilizing a more formative approach now where we've got 12 topics for module 1, and we've blocked them into blocks of 3 topics. And every block of 3 topics, we're asking participants to submit a formative report just to demonstrate, pretty similar to what we did, I guess, on the PG Cert HE that we studied a couple of years ago. But the delivery, I'm looking always at ways. I know that we haven't utilized Prezi yet. We've utilized YouTube for every single topic so far. Screencast-O-Matic has been a fantastic tool that Carl introduced me to. It's a wonderful tool. There are sort of downsides if you've got the free version, but they are minimal and easily overcome. Using Uvu at the moment, which is similar to Skype. Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn for all the social media, etc., etc.
Yeah, Steve, actually, I mean, one of the things I was going to ask you about was, I'm not sure about your current class size, but I know from previous conversations that potentially this course has the potential for kind of exploding in terms of numbers. I mean, into the kind of double hundreds of figures potentially or beyond, because it's completely distance learning and it's covering an area that I think up until now, either the course hasn't been available for these people to study, or if it has, they've kind of had to travel a distance to attend it, and maybe that's been a bit of a hindrance. So I think potentially what you need to be doing, as you obviously are at the moment, is kind of utilizing as much technology as possible that will be able to go out and capture as wide an audience as it possibly can, because the numbers potentially will be huge.
Well, our targets are 200 participants and 35 businesses before April 2015.
Right.
Now the clock is well and truly ticking.
Indeed.
We were a little bit late starting because of issues surrounding the funding, etc. I think it was, but we sort of started the ball rolling very quickly, and we've got to keep it rolling. The first cohort that we had was quite small. I think we're sort of 5 or 6 participants, but we've already had interest from 10 to 20 more. We're going to be looking at utilizing the group side of Moodle, which is another chat I've got to have with you, by the way. But just going back as well, the issue that you mentioned with schools having with YouTube, I've just made a note here when you were chatting about it that one of the participants emailed me yesterday or the day before and said that his business have put a block on YouTube.
Right.
And so he said, well, I'm struggling to see the videos until I get home, which contravenes the rules where he should be doing it at work, etc., etc. So we've had to work out ways of then delivering the content in more than one way.
Yes.
The one suggestion from a participant was that we just post up a PowerPoint presentation as a PDF, and then they've got it there as a note-taking facility when they watch the video, if they so do.
Yeah.
So there's always something there around the corner that we can utilize. And working with you guys is really been fruitful for us.
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, you know, on a very basic level, you know, we've come across that quite a lot before as well. You know, even something as basic as members of staff posting up Microsoft Office documents, and then we've come against students who say, well, that's fine, but I either don't have the version of Office that the tutor's using, or I don't have Office at all, or I'm using a particular device that won't allow me to open the Microsoft Office document. So we're always trying to say to staff, well, if you're putting up a Word document, that's fine, put up your Word document, but put it up as a PDF as well, put it up as something else that allows every student the ability to access the documents. We don't want anybody to be kind of unfairly treated in a sense that they can't make access to the documentation that's key to the completion of their course.
I know Carl has been a big fan of all the free apps and software that we've got available. And any of the proprietary tools, as you said, some people just might not be able to afford a full suite of Office, for instance.
Yeah, of course, that's it. You know, I mean, we've come across, you know, not so much recently, but certainly kind of in the dim and distant past, modules where tutors are putting up links to documents, but you need a very, very expensive and specialist piece of software to actually be able to open the document. And 99% of the students on that module didn't have access to that document, to that bit of software. So, you know, the 1% who could afford it or who are lucky enough to have a copy, that was great, they could access it, but everybody else was kind of locked away and kind of held out in the cold, essentially. So yeah, it's always worth trying to think of kind of ways and means around any potential issues that you come up against, so that all students are fairly treated and can access any of the documents that they want. Another question, actually, Steve, that I wanted to ask you is when you first kind of, because all of the modules that run as part of this course are held in our virtual learning environment, Moodle, and I just wondered, at the very, very beginning, when you were first trying to plan out how you were going to put this course online, how did you kind of decide which bits of software you wanted to start off with to get the information across? Were there one or two key things you had in your head that you thought, well, we have to use this stuff to get the information out there, and then we'll kind of build on it from there? Were there one or two things that were key to the creation of these online modules?
Well, the platform that we used initially to create documents, and one, in fact, we're using them just to create the YouTube videos now, is PowerPoint. But as you said, it's part of Microsoft Suite. Some people might not have it, but then the beauty of transferring it to YouTube is that you don't have to have that particular application.
Absolutely.
Now, we've gone and had a session with you with regards to Prezi.
Yes.
And it's something that we're going to develop. We're going to look retrospectively at the other stuff that we've created and hopefully freshen everything up with regards to using Prezi. It's been a bit difficult at the moment with the time constraints and writing everything, getting everything done, etc. But it's definitely on the horizon there to use that particular tool. And I know that we set up a session with you for all three of us, part of the team, to utilize that piece of free software.
Absolutely. There are two new updates that's come out this week. The first one is, I'll go back to YouTube. YouTube now lets you do photo slideshows.
Right,
I mean, this is literally in the last kind of 24 hours they've launched this. So the idea is you log into your YouTube area and you go over to the upload area. There's like a little button on YouTube to upload. But now there's an option that says photo slideshow. And then what you do is you get the photos you want. So if you've got PowerPoint, say, you save all those PowerPoints as image files, or whatever, and then you literally drag them from your desktop and dump them onto YouTube. It will then upload all those images, and you can then use YouTube's built-in video editor to arrange those images as you see fit, put transitions in and all that kind of stuff. So traditionally, I mean, certainly for the last 4 or 5 years when we've done that, we've saved the PowerPoint slides as images, but we bring them into Windows Movie Maker or iMovie to do it. Now you can just do it from the browser.
And I'm assuming it lets you record an audio track over it then as well. I mean, that's kind of fantastic.
Cool. I mean, which leads me nicely onto the next bit. It's not planned at all, but it's with the audio track. Is Prezi this week unveiled. They have a new feature that lets you upload audio tracks to the Prezis.
Fantastic.
So with a Prezi, for those of you who are not familiar with Prezi is basically like a zooming presentation tool. So it essentially gives you a big white canvas and lets you put things down like text and images, like big stickers, and you can rearrange them however you want. And then it gives you this imaginary camera that you can move, you can zoom in and zoom out and pan left and up and down and right. So essentially you can scroll across this big canvas and show people whatever aspects of the big picture you want them to see. But now with Prezi, each time you make one of these zooms, you can attach an audio file. So the one criticism of Prezi was that it wasn't very good for a standalone presentation.
No.
But now it can be used if you've got a computer system hooked up to a TV with some speakers. You can actually have a voiceover talking about stuff, and the presentation is zooming in and out and doing everything you wanted to do as well. And again, it's completely free. So,
I mean, that's fantastic, because I
checking
know
out.
this is actually something that Steve and his colleague Chris have asked me about on numerous occasions. Is, you know, in the very first training session, if I remember rightly, that's one of the questions that you asked, and I think it's something you have asked previously since. So the fact that
But that's literally the last 24 hours.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely superb.
Thanks to Google Reader.
Yeah, and not everybody. Thanks to Google Reader. Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Google Reader.
As a stopgap, I've been using the tool that's available on the Mac, which is iMovie, which is a really, really fantastic tool. One I'm still learning, but I mean, with Carl's help as well, it's been really, really useful and created some really good quality videos for me.
Yeah. I mean, we're always big advocates of free software, but I mean, I have to hand it to iMovie. I have not found anything as good as iMovie. I mean, it comes, you get a version of it kind of quote unquote free when you buy a Mac anyway. I mean, Windows Movie Maker is okay, but I mean, if you're seriously wanting to get into video production and you don't have lots of money to spend on really posh video editing software, then you can't go far wrong with iMovie. It's a wonderful tool.
No, absolutely.
I've got to set up a session. Is it iGarage? It's
GarageBand.
We use that to edit this very podcast.
Right.
Yeah, that's actually just what I was going to mention next.
That's something I need to sit with you and just go through, because it's a bit sort of daunting at the moment. But I'll do my YouTube like I normally do, and I'll come and say I've done this and that.
Absolutely.
What else is
I'll arrange a training session with you, Steve, and by the time I come to meet you, you will be the chief guru on GarageBand, no doubt.
I had to learn GarageBand for this podcast, and I learned it all off YouTube. I literally went on there when it was like GarageBand Basics or GarageBand 101, and it literally takes you from, you know, absolutely nothing. I mean, I'd done a bit of editing in Audacity previously, so that kind of I had something to draw upon. But the video said, right, I'm going to assume you know absolutely nothing. Don't take offence. Not going to be patronising, but here we go. It's really, really good.
Yeah. Okay, and kind of moving on to probably the next logical steps. We've talked about stuff that you started the module with. Steve, is there anything at the moment that you've seen recently, perhaps in the last couple of weeks or months, that's caught your eye and you've thought potentially it might be something that you'd like to use to create a kind of content for your module, or just something kind of outside of work software-wise that maybe you've seen and thought, you know, that's something I'd quite like to have a go at and get some experience with, other than GarageBand, obviously.
Yeah, well, I mean, having not used Google Reader, and its life is very short now, as we've just learned.
Yeah.
But certainly going to be looking at using or familiarising myself with this Feedly. And using that within Moodle.
Yes.
And sharing, because the horizon is changing very, very quickly with energy management. Stories are coming up at a very rapid rate of knots. So I think that's definitely one that I'm going to be utilising very, very soon. But I'm always looking at what's available. I'll be checking out Paul's website for news stories of what's coming, and trying to integrate it, because I think if we're going to get new students, keep the students for the whole 4 modules, because our remit is that they only essentially have to do one module.
Right.
But the course that we've written is hopefully going to encourage them to get the whole lot, get the set.
Yeah.
And to do that, I think we've got to engage people in a modern way and keep it up to date.
Yeah. Yes.
And what's out there, I mean, it's a vast sea of technology, and I don't know it all, but definitely I'm going to keep my eyes and ears open.
Do you make use of social media at all in the course?
We do to some extent, but because we're so very new, a fortnight really in its sort of contact with participants, I've set up LinkedIn, I've set up Twitter, I've set up Facebook.
Gotcha.
But again, another tool that Carl put me onto, and a question that my boss Chris questioned: he's got a personal Twitter account, and we've got our own course Twitter account.
Sure.
How can he link the two? Well, IFT, I think, is the tool that you've sort of mentioned.
Yeah,
and it's something
That's right.
I mean, is it recipes that you create, etc., etc.? That's a job for me for next week now, to sort of just have a deeper look at that.
Yeah.
I've had a quick look. Looks really good, really useful at linking, and About Me as well. That is a good tool for linking all of your social media, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But I think I fell short, because what I did, I created groups within LinkedIn and Facebook, where I should have perhaps created separate entities.
Gotcha.
And it's these little things that you learn as you develop.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a process, and it is organic. I mean, and again, every tutor, every class is different. So it's a case of you can look at what other people are doing, but then, excuse me, ultimately go, well, this is what works for me.
Yeah.
And the important thing is you have a go, and then go, well, yeah, that bit worked, but that bit didn't. So I'll try changing something about it. But yeah, IFT is IFT has changed the way I work because initially I had to put a fair bit of time into it, say 4 or 5 hours, to can really get my head around it and write all the recipes I wanted, or nick them from somebody else who'd been kind enough to share them. But once you've done it, it will, in the long run, it will save you hundreds and hundreds of hours. So again, within the department, we have several, because we don't have any administrative support per se. We have Amanda, who's been in. She's wonderful. She's our CELT administrator, but she's not part of CDELT. She's not part of our department. So we had to automate an awful lot of these things to maintain a valid social media presence. So we use IFT now, so that essentially we have one blog that we will put content into. And then from that blog will act as a trigger. And IFT will basically take all of those posts that we make and automatically push them out to LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all of these different things, so that I or any other member of my team doesn't have to sit there going, oh, right, have we posted it to Twitter yet? Have we done this? Have we done that?
Yeah.
So it is a bit of there is a bit of timing required at the start, but once you've done that, it'll pay you back.
Yeah, just knowing that literally you just make one post that will then filter out to all the other stuff that normally you'd have to spend that time adding your information to. It just makes life so much easier. It really does. I think we've talked about IFT, maybe touched on it before in previous podcasts, but it's always worth reiterating because I think it's something that people would just, as you say, it takes a little bit of time to get things set up, but in terms of the savings you make down the line, it's a fantastic tool. It really is. As you said previously, you use a lot of technologies, varied technologies in your modules that you put out to students. And the one thing I wanted to know is, do you think? I think I know the answer already, but do you think it's a useful thing to not only give yourself the experience of using these technologies and to kind of increase your knowledge of the technologies that are out there, but also in essence, you're putting those technologies out to the students and showing them alternatives that they can use to better themselves, to better their presentation skills, to better their video creation skills, whatever it might be. So, I think it's always been the case, perhaps in the past, that students have just always used PowerPoint because they didn't know of any alternative, or they've always used Microsoft Word because they didn't know of an alternative. But in essence, what you're doing is you're taking these technologies, you're making your modules better, and then you're showing students the better technologies that are out there that they can actually utilize. Yeah,
definitely. The first real sort of sign of these new technologies being utilized was from a face-to-face perspective, because I've still got one toe in the old forensics course.
Yes.
And a couple of students were preparing presentations, and I looked around the room and noticed, I honed in, it was just after we'd had our Prezi session. I said, wow, you're using Prezi. And then obviously chased that up after the event and asked them how it went, and I think the feedback was really, really good. So this new technology and then the adaptations that have been made recently, as Paul mentioned. But one of the assessment criteria for each of the modules, bar for the last one, is that they have to support their written report with a presentation.
Right.
So we're going to offer, alongside you, because as you know, you offer support to staff and students alike within the department. And so even if it's via an email, via an Uvu Skype chat, etc., you can offer the students the advice. I can support that advice as well. And we can then encourage people to use these new technologies that they might not necessarily have found without embarking on the course.
Absolutely.
So if I see Prezi presentations done well, I can feed off that as well. As you've said already today, it's a very organic process where you're feeding off everything you see. Throw away the bits you don't like, keep the bits that you do.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's such a shame that if these technologies are out there and they're not being utilized by some of the people who could make the best use of them, the creative students that are out there who they've got ideas bubbling away inside them, but they want to express those ideas in a different way, in something that kind of stands out a little bit from the next guy. And we've all been to kind of conferences where you're sitting through 5 or 6 PowerPoint presentations, one after the other, and then somebody chucks a Prezi presentation in the middle of it, and it just kind of changes the room. And I know we're going on about the kind of great stuff with Prezi, but obviously those who remember the conversation with Carl Peters a few podcasts ago also need to be aware of the fact that you can go overboard as well with all this new technology. So with Prezi, for example, Carl said he kind of tends to feel a little bit seasick because people get a bit overexcited with using it. So it's kind of finding a nice natural balance between using these new technologies but not thinking you need to chuck all the great stuff in one go and make this crazy zany thing. So it's finding a nice...
it's like that, I mean, with PowerPoint, don't you? There's that really good video online with that comedian talking about PowerPoint, and he describes it as pointless motion.
Yes.
Where people have these things flying in left, right, and centre and crazy fonts, and you can always tell someone who's just got to grips with PowerPoint because they will have word art left, right, and centre.
Absolutely.
And they will have that animation where every single letter drops in, and it's so it's always very. I mean, when we talk to students about delivering presentations, we will say to them, go online and watch some really good presenters. Go to TED.com because the TED presentations, all of them, they're all different, but they're all fantastic. Yeah. Go and watch how Steve Jobs did presentations rather, because again, an amazing presenter to getting that message across, rather than kind of standing there with a piece of paper, reading the text off the piece of paper, or even worse, putting all the text on the PowerPoint.
Yes.
And then reading off the
Absolutely. There's nothing worse than literally somebody standing in front of a PowerPoint presentation with hundreds and hundreds of words scrolling down the screen, and they're literally just reading what you're looking at. Yeah. There's nothing worse than that. But equally, there's nothing worse, as you say, than someone who's put more effort into creating the presentation than into the content of the presentation. Absolutely. So,
I think the philosophy of our course is certainly going to be quite important for the participants that are taking part, because as I've said already, 3 of the 4 modules will encourage these participants to create presentations. Now, our idea, both Chris and mine, we're going to ask these participants to potentially present their ideas, not just to us, but to senior management within their own business. It's going to be real-world stuff that they might have to then present these ideas for internal investment that will hopefully see the business, see these tough times through, etc.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's the great thing about your course, isn't it? I think that it's not, not there's anything wrong with it at all, but it's not students who are kind of just in the world of university life who are just creating presentations for their peers. Yeah. These are actually people out in the real world, in industry, who have to almost immediately take the stuff that you've shown them and put it out there to clients or their bosses or their peers within the industry that they work in. So
it could actually be the make or break of a business, particularly when you go further into the modules, when you start looking at energy audits, etc., and you might identify a significant problem that, had it not been identified through audit and presented to senior management, could have been the death of the business, for instance.
Absolutely, of course, yeah. One other question I wanted to ask you is if there was a particular piece of technology that because we talked about loads and loads of great stuff, but I'm wondering if there's just one thing, if you had to focus in on one particular piece of technology that you thought was the one that on a day-to-day basis you just couldn't get by without. Was there something that pops into your head straight away and you think, that is the bit of technology that just gets me through my day and makes my life easier on a day-to-day basis?
Well, at the moment, it has to be my editing tool for... I use iMovie, and I'm sure there are others available. I like iMovie. Yeah. Without that, I've made so many mistakes. So I can recreate a voiceover, and the tool has been really, really useful. Hand in hand with that, I guess YouTube.
Right.
Because it's provided me with the facility. There were a few teething issues where 15 minutes was a cut-off. Yeah. Couldn't upload anything beyond 15 minutes. But once it doesn't cost you money. You subscribe, you answer phone call, you say, yes, it's me. Away you go. Yeah. You can then post up videos beyond that 15 minutes. So those two really have been vitally important to just creating the first parts of Module 1. What we're doing as well, we're coming to the end of week 4 next week. And what Chris and I have discussed in this week, to be honest, is feedback, which is vital for everyone, not just from a formative perspective for us and when we come to the summative assessments, but certainly from what we're doing. So when I did face-to-face lectures in a class, I used to do a little task where I gave out a post-it to each and every student. And on there, I wanted 3 things: what they liked, what they disliked, and what they'd like to change.
Right.
So the concept, I think, now that we're going to utilize next week at the end of week 4, which gives us time for the 10 weeks that we've got of module 1 to change something or introduce new technologies if they're out there, if people bring it to our attention. We can then carry on with the things that they like and then change the things that are not working. Yeah. So I think being proactive and organic, as you've pointed out, is vital in this day and age of changing technologies.
One tool that some staff are using in the university used to be called Wallwisher, but they've changed their name to Padlet now. And it basically lets you create an online wall, a sticky wall, that lets students or whoever write notes on little pretend post-it notes that can then be placed on the wall. And the beauty of it is they can be anonymous.
It was going to be the exact question. Because of the way I did it within class.
Yes.
If someone just gathered them and put them on an envelope, they are anonymous. And people are far more honest in their approach.
Yeah, of course.
So if that's something that is available as an anonymous approach, it's something I'd like to use.
It's lovely. Again, what we found is that the culture of the kind of class has to be right for the learners to kind of engage with it. But as long as you can get the culture right in terms of if you already foster this environment where students aren't afraid to go, oh, that's a really good idea, or I'm not quite sure about this. If they're confident enough to do that on a piece of paper, you might find you can say to them, well, actually, we'll keep the paper. Paper's great, no problem at all. But maybe if you have an idea that occurs to you at 3 a.m. or whatever, and you think, oh, I'm not in the class, and I want to suggest this, but I don't want to put my name down, you can say to them, well, here's an alternative to the paper system or a companion to it maybe. And but the beauty of the Padlet thing is that the other students can see what other people have written, not in terms of who's written it, but they can look at those suggestions. So they might say, oh, that was a really good idea, or they might then spark off a discussion about, well, someone said this, is this worthwhile pursuing? So
do each of these walls have a moderator type approach where you can take off?
They can do, if you're in charge of the wall, you can take off. Certainly working in higher education, we haven't experienced any scenario where they've been abused, because we're all dealing with 18 plus adults. However, I would imagine if you are a school teacher listening to this, you might think to yourself, no, and that's absolutely fine. For things like that, you might then want to say, well, all right, if I've got a virtual learning environment, I'm going to use the forums within that, or there's lots of different ways of setting up kind of chat rooms or forums and stuff which are monitored, but the Padlet is something with this specific kind of suggestion box type use in mind. Really.
Well, maybe I'll have a look at that now from next Monday and then let you know if we implement it.
Absolutely.
Come the end of week 4.
Yeah, and it's always great to get feedback from staff who've kind of jumped on board and taken up some of these, packages that we talk about. Because we test them and we run them, but you guys are using them in the big wide world, as it were. So it'd be great to kind of have a go, get some feedback from you, and certainly we can kind of put that towards listeners further down the line to give them an update on how you've got on with that. Absolutely,
definitely.
I'm sure there are some listeners out there who are interested in the energy management course. I'm just wondering, you said you've got a presence on Twitter, and I'm wondering if you know off the top of your head what the Twitter handle is, so if anybody wants to have a little look or listen, they can jump in and kind of find out some information about yourselves.
Yeah, our Twitter username is @WBLENG Newport. So if any of the listeners want to join us or follow us on Twitter, lots of new stories, particularly, I don't know whether you guys are familiar with the term fracking.
Yes, indeed. Yes, something to do with oil, I think, isn't it?
I know that's one topic that Chris Gledhill, the course coordinator, has been following and posting on recently, both on Twitter, Facebook, and a few of the other portals that we use. So, please join us. We are new there, but we've got quite a few following with regards to Carbon Trust, etc., and a few high-profile users.
Brilliant. And I know Paul has literally, as we speak, followed you on his Twitter account, and Paul is followed by pretty much everybody in the entire universe, so surely you'll gain
I've just
some
broken
followers from there.
2,000 followers, so I'm quite pleased with that.
Wow, hark at you, 2,000 followers. Very good, very good.
Very chuffed.
So, Steve, in regards to the course, who is it specifically aimed at, and kind of who are the people that take part as students on this course?
Well, because it's a European social funded project, there are certain criteria that we have to meet to allow participants onto the course. The convergence area in Wales plays a huge part, which is sort of the valleys and the west side rather of Wales. I think there's 22 unity authorities within Wales and 15, maybe sort of one or two either side of that. 15 are within the convergence area. Sadly, Newport isn't part of that, so we've got to eliminate businesses that are linked with Newport. But there is a caveat that states that if the participant lives in the convergence area but works not in the convergence area, they can still be a participant on the course.
Right.
So there are a few technicalities that we need to follow because of the strict European Social Fund politics, etc. But pretty much anyone. And it is fully funded, depending on what funding your business has. Any listeners here from business, any listeners here that live within the convergence area, it's fully funded for the majority, I would say 99% of participants, so there's nothing to pay.
Wow,
any payments that are required are usually in kind, so it's just time.
Okay.
So there's no cash changing hands. I'm not allowed to say free.
No.
I have to say fully funded.
Yeah.
So, but
don't worry, we'll beep you out when you do say it. So that's fine. Don't worry.
but those are the strict rules. But I would say to everyone that is interested in the subject, it's another string to their bow, because I've sort of joined the team thinking well ahead.
Yes.
It could open doors for me. I am from an engineering background originally. When I did an apprenticeship many years ago, came back to university to do a digital forensics degree, which is totally different. But then it opened a door for me here as well, which takes me full circle. And because the topic is so hot, like technology, they go hand in hand. So I'm enjoying every facet of it.
Okay, well, I think that's everything for this week. It's been a fantastic and really interesting episode, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to it. All that remains is for me to say, first of all, thank you very much to Steve for coming along as our special guest.
Thanks for having me.
It's been really interesting, and I know we'll be working loads more over the coming months anyway. So.
We will indeed.
Absolutely. Thanks very much to Paul again,
Always
once more for contributing amazingly to the podcast.
That far, but
Well, okay. I tried. Okay, and finally, thank you very much from me for listening, and hopefully we'll catch you all again on episode 16.
Bye.
Bye-bye.